Welcome to the Life Rocks podcast. In this podcast, we explore how nature, science, education, and culture can benefit all children and future generations. This is a show for educators, parents, mentors, and anyone interested in making the lives of our children, families, and communities better. So sit back, take a breath, and enjoy the show. And now for your host, Asher Cloran.
Hello, Life Rocks listeners. This is the Life Rocks podcast, and I am very happy to have Lainie with me on the show today. Lainie is a best-selling author, international speaker, community leader, teen mentor, and alternative education advocate who's helping to spearhead the thriving worldschooling movement. She has co-founded the project World School with her son, which offers month-long retreats and immersive learning community experiences for self-directed teens from all over the world. So basically, Lainie is very well accomplished in helping to mentor teens to better places of learning and stepping outside of the conventions of mainstream education. And I'm really excited to jump into all of this today. So welcome, Lainie, to the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much. And thank you for that lovely intro. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Yeah, thanks for coming along. I asked a question to Lainie before the podcast, which was, if we can provide anything to the children of this earth or the younger generations that are here now, it is, Lainie said, that we need to empower their sovereignty, support their mental health with tools, and to create partnership with children. And I think that's a great place to kickstart this podcast and what you're about. And I think empowering sovereignty for everyone's really important, especially children. And then my heart goes out to the teenagers of this world who can seem to be the outcast of society or on the fringe, misunderstood, not seen, not heard, not all of those things, which I definitely experienced in my youth and many of my friends have. So there's a real disconnect there. And what you've got on offer in your book is an amazing array of tools to help teenagers regulate their emotions, discover themselves, do the shadow work, have self-inquiry. And not only that, it's facilitated through mentorship and, as you put it here, partnership. So I think I wanted to kickstart the discussion by, some parents have a motto or a saying, and it may be a myth, that you can't be friends with your child because you've got a parent. So where does partnership come into that, and how is partnership different to friendship or then just being a parent?
So each of those has definitions. Some of them have cultural definitions, like, parenting. Parenting is not supposed to be, your child is not supposed to be your friend. And I think a lot of this dives into a convention of authoritarian, like a paradigm. So the idea is you can't be a friend with your child because you have to be the boss of them. And a lot of people, especially in generations before this, just accepted that as the status quo. All parents want what's best, right? All parents give birth 99.9%. We want what's best for our children. We give birth to them. We want them to lead and live happy lives. We want them to feel secure in the world. We want them to feel empowered. Like, all of the things that we want for our kids are really in their best interest. The problem is, Being raised in an authoritarian paradigm does not allow our children to find within themselves their own empowerment, their own source of happiness, their own even self-regulation. And even though as parents, we want what's best, we feel like we must guide them, that gets translated into many parents' brains as forcing them to do something in order to protect them. And I think that's a myth and a paradigm that needs to be tossed away, thrown on its head, and re-examined. You enter into a relationship where it's an inequality of power, then you're not actually trying to find the space for connection. My book and all the work that I've been doing and the way that I raised my son, we totally threw that idea on its head. I raised my son within a partnership paradigm, and the goal was not to be a friend. The goal was to be in partnership with him, but through partnership and connection, not coercion, connection, we actually established a really deep relationship, which is a friendship, right? That wasn't my goal. My goal was connection. As a byproduct, there is friendship in there. And the majority of parents that adapt a kind of paradigm which is based on authority, they're doing it because they have fear around what their child might or might not do. The problem is you don't give them a chance to make a decision and empower themselves, and you don't give them a chance to make mistakes and fail in a safe environment, in safe spaces. And you're not providing the tools then to allow them the experience of unpacking, the experience of processing mistakes, the experience of recognizing dysregulation. Sometimes it comes into play that they've panicked and made a decision. You're actually forcing them to have those experiences in real life when they're an adult, where the stakes are much higher.
Wow, so much in there. Yeah, and in this world of all of the modern pitfalls that parents can be looking at for their child and trying to guide them through this shitstorm of stuff that can go wrong, I think it can be the default setting for parents to go back to that fear and control of, look at all of the bad stuff in the world, we've got to stop things or keep a close eye or control. And so what advice do you have to those parents who are actually deeply concerned about really challenging things, which might be overuse of media, overuse of social media, pornography, drugs, alcohol, some of these things that can actually be harmful? How does a parent manage their emotions around feeling the fear about that stuff and also guiding their child or their teen in a way that's secure and safe for the child as well, and to maintain the connection between the two, because that's a sticking point that I see for a lot of parents.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I, first of all, in no way am saying that partnership parenting is unparenting or not being engaged. I'm not saying that at all.
No, yeah, I don't think that, but I'm very interested to see how, because I know from your book and just looking into it that you actually have so much deep common sense around this topic and how to do it in a very engaged way. So I'd love to hear that.
Partnership parenting absolutely is highly engaged parenting. And when you enter into a partnership, the partnership, it theoretically and in best case scenario, now this takes a lot of time within the mind of the parent, but partnership should be equal, right? Doesn't mean that we're the same people, that we have the same experience or carry the same responsibilities, but it means that there is equality. And that's a huge mind fuck for many parents, right? Because common belief in Western culture is that our children are empty vessels and we have to fill them up, right?
Yeah.
If you look at it from a different perspective, like your child is born with a personality and wants, likes, desires, needs, preferences, all of those things already built into who they are. They develop the nuances and the values and all that stuff from the experience of being in a culture or being in their family specifically, and all the other layers that extend outwards. That will happen. That will help create the nuances. But a child who's born with a deep sense of justice, if they're born with that, that will carry through their lives. If they're born with a creative spark, that will carry through their lives, unless, of course, we squash those particular things. But there are some innate qualities of who a child is when they're born, and to recognize those things, enhance and bring them out, that's part of a partnership paradigm. That's part of an engagement between two equal people. So as a parent, we're going to nurture all of those things. Part of that is mentoring. Part of that is modeling, living your values. And part of the partnership as a parent is being accountable for the half of me that I'm bringing into the partnership. So if I have unhealed trauma and I get triggered by silent treatment, that's not my child's fault. That's me and my work. And that's what I'm accountable for, is unpacking that stuff. So the equality in being accountable for the me that I'm bringing to the half of the partnership models for them that they're accountable for the half that they're bringing too. It doesn't make me better or worse. It makes me equal. Granted, as parent, I theoretically pay the bills and responsible, and it just means I have different responsibilities within the partnership, but it doesn't make me more or less of a human to that other person. And that's, like I said, a total mind shift for many parents. They can't get beyond the equality, and that's really difficult for them to wrap their heads around. I know you didn't ask me this, but one of the values that I made sure was accurate and scientifically proven in my book is understanding the biological, physiological, and psychological changes within the teen or adolescent experience, because adolescence is not easy no matter what. It just isn't.
No.
So having a parent that understands and can, from a more mature mind, be able to accommodate some of these changes, because the stages of development, especially, they're drastic during adolescence. This is one of the biggest and most important times of development in a human being's life, that from birth to 0 to 3, and then the adolescent period. These two periods will determine the patterned thinking of an adult throughout the rest of their life, right?
Absolutely.
And so understanding what the heck's going on inside of them from a biological, neurobiological, biological, hormonal, intellectual, social, all of these different aspects. And I wanted to make sure that parents understand that. So I broke it into all of these different sections so they can understand the chemical, everything that's happening inside of them, and relax, exhale, and not so tough on these teens. There's a lot going on. So that, to me, will help the parent rationalize interacting in a way that serves the partnership. That's just understanding what's happening.
Absolutely. And that was one of the biggest standouts from me opening your book, and the science there behind it, the neurobiology, the biology, the awareness of the hormones, the awareness of psychology, mapping that developmental experience for teenagers. Because until we do that as teachers, mentors, parents, we don't understand what's going on there. It's obscured by the stories that we tell ourselves as a culture about teenagers, and we can't see them properly. So we won't get to experience that connection with that generation. And I'm a big believer in multi-generational learning.
Me too.
The fact that every generation has so much experience, living experience. They're the living, resonating experience of that time and space for a human being. And if we block out any one of those things, we're missing out. We're missing out big time.
Totally said.
So you mentioned in your book that the world has become your best classroom. And I love that, because in my book, I say that nature is the best classroom. And nature and the world are very close kind of things.
Yeah, very similar.
Maybe like a yin and a yang. One's the natural embodied experience, and the world is the cultural human experience that's wrapped around the earth. And so I just wanted to ask you whether you could share a little bit about how maybe different landscapes and ecosystems influence learning experiences, or how you have seen influence learning experiences, awareness, and the building up of children as they enter into these spaces with you around the world, because you do that a lot, traveling with children and teens.
I do. This is going to answer your question in a way that you're probably not expecting.
Sure.
The external world, which includes the cities, the culture, the nature, all of that is a reflection of our internal worlds. We are walking, breathing interpreters of the world through our own eyes. And a lot of that has to do with not only our world views, but our state, our internal state. If we're feeling stress or anxiety or depression, the things that we notice about the outside world are going to be reflective of that, and vice versa. And I think that was the biggest discovery that I had with my son. My son and I discovered together through our 12 plus years or 10 plus years of travel together, nonstop travel, that the world around us was a reflection of where we were emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, or any of the lees that you want to add. And that really, again, put the onus back on us to check in and see what was not in alignment within our own self. And self-inquiry, the practice of self-inquiry as a family culture or as a family practice, and normalizing that together can then help create that language between every member of your family. And as long as there is a safe space in your family cultivated that is not filled with judgment, where you do not throw that information back in your child's face ever, you're then creating a self-awareness and an accountability that will lead them through higher emotional intelligence and relationship to themselves in the world and to themselves and other people that will serve them for the rest of their lives. So nature is really important. Cultivating an appreciation for nature helps us cultivate an appreciation for our natural internal worlds, but as well as the social world of humans, because we're all about connecting. That is probably the most common desire in all of humanity, is to connect, to be in relation with one another. worldviews and understanding and unpacking our own worldviews is one of those tools that I talk about in my book. So is defining, first going in and finding and then defining what your core values are.
Yep.
Because all of these things and experiences and all the other stuff that makes up our lens to see the world,
Yeah.
those things gives us greater understanding to ourselves. If we get triggered because there's injustice in the world, is that because we are feeling injustice inside of ourselves? Is that because we have a core value that's very strong? And is it attached to a shadow belief about ourselves? There's so many places you can go, but
Totally.
the world around us will give us the information that we need to know about the states of our internal worlds, and we are accountable for that experience.
Massively.
Yeah.
Yeah, really well said. And in Steiner philosophy, they talk about 3 distinct phases of childhood. The early learning phase being one of discovery and joy and interaction with through the senses. The primary school development is more about exploration and experimentation and a realm of action. And then in that phase, they're extending their field out and into the environment around them. And then the teenage years from the 12 through adolescence is really about social interaction and the questions of morality and what's right and what's good, and wanting to help and assist is really key to the development of teenagers at this phase. And I personally think that development gets inhibited a little bit at that stage because teenagers aren't pointed in the right direction, and they can feel helpless to change the problems of the world unless they have mentors like yourself or like other people who can point them towards doing something good in the world. So how do you see that experience of opening up to other worldviews and cultures and getting out there ignites those social elements in teenagers, and how have you seen that extend then throughout their lives?
Yeah. One of the developmental attributes of the adolescent experience is social learning, right? And this is a time where young people are individuating. They are trying on all sorts of different identities and trying to figure out how they fit into the world. And it should be a time of play and experimentation. It's also a time of hyper focusing on the things that light them up. And you'll find that a lot of the isms and ologies that we're most familiar with come from or sparked from young people, and adolescence, as we know, runs up until age 25, which is part of the time that the brain is still developing. So I think it's an exciting time.
Yeah.
The hyper focus which is what the teenage brain or the adolescent brain is wired to do. That is the birth of art movements and music and all these political movements and things of that nature. That's really the wonderful part of it. That on the flip side, there is the hyper focus of certain things and not being able to be able to determine what consequences are or how these little points fit into the big picture. And there's got to be, like you said, a mentor, an adult, a family member, somebody in their life that can show them without judging, not throwing judgment or punishment, but to be able to show them, hold up a mirror so they can look at the big picture and create times that are spaces that are safe to talk about them, times that are not confrontational, but that are discussion based, that actually empower the young person to think about things through leading questions, through support, through all of these things that are generally overlooked. Because teens, like, I run workshops for teens, and I host free meetups every week with teens. We talk philosophy. I ask them, what do you think about this? And I've been doing this for 2 years, these free meetups every week. And I hear over and over, thank you, Lainie. No adult asks me what I think. And that is at the root of the problem. Teens are, like you've said, there's myths around how horrible teens are, that they do horrible things, they're irrational. They're like, I have a whole chapter of myths that I dispel in my book, but parents and those that are caretakers and work with teens take the time to really unpack and understand that those myths are designed, they're not true, first of all. They're not based on science. They're based on what's convenient for the adult to think in order to impose control over the behavior of a teen. It's really, it's convenient for the parent to impose control to stop them from giving attitude or demand that they do that. Like, that's just bullshit. This is just an authoritarian paradigm of bullshit. If you want to be in partnership, you've got to understand what they're going through and be able to apply empathy and be able to connect in a way that's meaningful. Most parents want that. They just don't know how to do it. They just don't know.
Yeah. Wow. So powerful. And maybe you can jump into a few of those myths, just bust them out the park, because most people listening.
How controversial do you want to get?
Max controversy.
All right. Here's the one that I love talking about. The belief is that teens are wasting their time playing video games and they get addicted to it. Okay. If we were sitting in a room of 100 people that were parents of teens, I'd ask them to raise their hand. Yeah. I'd say that's bullshit. Okay. So here's why. As a parent or an adult who's not an adolescent, we're looking at it through the lens of our experience. And our experience, like, I'm 55, like, I didn't grow up with computers. Our experience is, and parents even that are younger than me, 20 years younger, they probably grew up with computers, but not they didn't have their tablets and their phones and all that.
All the handheld stuff.
It's different. And for us to say, I didn't have all that stuff, you spend too much time in front of the computer or on your tablet or on your phone, is based on their experience of what their childhood was like. So that's the first comparison. That's wrong. How do you know what's appropriate for the time that is now? The time that is now looks very different from a social perspective, from a world perspective, from a technological perspective, from a cultural perspective. It's different. So we have to first be aware that we're comparing it to our own experience. The second thing is, there are many studies done that look at the place of the brain that is recorded and lit up when there is an addiction. The addiction part is not the same as a chemical addiction when you're playing. Video games is not an actual addiction. There's adrenaline rush. There's a lot of stuff that happens, but it's not an actual addiction. And the majority of the parents that talk about, my kid, all he wants to do is game. My kid, if I let him, he'd be on his computer, or she'd be on his computer gaming 24/7. And that actually might be true. But consider this. It might be true because they are tasked already and already told when they can and can't be on the computer. How many hours can they be on it? How many hours do they need to be doing other stuff? And so they're already being told that a thing that gives them pleasure is scarce. And when you create a scarcity relationship to something that you especially enjoy, that is culturally relevant to their age group, you are then creating but it's scarce. I need to have it. I need to have it all the time. Now, kids that are unschooled and don't live with those restrictions, like my son was, there was a time where, from maybe 12 to about 15. Oh my God. He loved playing online. That was his thing. But you know what? He was quite aware of self-regulation. He understood when it took him some time of playing, but he understood when too much was too much, and he self-regulated. He understood how to balance his biological needs, like he was hungry, right? He didn't have to manage being on somebody else's schedule. He didn't go to school, so he didn't have to wake up at a certain time. And he was really able to do what he loved and have support from his mom, me, who then asked about his games, and we had conversations about it. And what that did is, even though my eyes were glazing over and I didn't want to watch another hour of Minecraft, what it did is it created connection. He knew that no matter what his interest was, I may not have the same interest, but I'm not judging him. I'm not, his interests are bad, and I'm allowing him to self-regulate. I'm doing it very connected, checking in on him. Hey, honey, how you doing? You've been on the computer for many hours. Do you want to take a break and join me in the kitchen, and I'll make us some pancakes or something fun?
Yeah.
And a lot of times my intuition would know when to ask that. I say, yeah, Mom, I'll be right there. But that looks very different than get off the computer, you've been on it too long, and get in the kitchen and eat. That's a very different interaction. And even though his choices weren't my choices, or wouldn't be the choices I was making for me, I was not sitting in judgment of that. I did not have the idea he was harming himself. I had the idea that he was empowering himself and learning a lot. I can tell you all the social skills he learned, the teamwork, the research, the strategy. He even told me all about ores and like mining stuff, which I hadn't known about, that he learned through playing games, right? Yeah, that's a really controversial topic for many to hear a parent, especially my age, saying, first of all, it's not addictive. We're talking about a period of time where they may find something that really interests them. And what's more important, me controlling what I think is right for him, I'm allowing him to self-regulate and make mistakes. And then we unpack them and talk about them. You played for 18 hours. How you feeling? And most of the time when he had those days, like, he would not touch the computer or gaming for weeks afterwards because he chose to. Mom, let's go out and do something today. Okay, let's do it.
So good. That's such a great perspective on all of that. And yeah, I think really valuable for parents to see those differences in the paradigms.
Yeah.
It's almost what popped into my head is that control's like the fast food version of parenting. and mentoring and partnerships, like the healthy food version of parenting.
Yeah, I love that. And I have to say, you may have some conventional parents listening to this podcast right now and might feel tempted to turn it off because they're probably screaming at their computer, "This is bullshit. Who is this woman? What does she know?" And that trigger response is their work. What's coming up for you that you cannot expand your perspective and consider another way of looking at this? Is there something that you have fear around that is anchored in such a way that you cannot even consider this? And the trigger is about the parent, not about the child, right?
100%.
Now, for those of you who don't know, Life Rocks is not just a podcast. It is an education foundation centered around connecting children to the magic of nature through earth sciences. As a self-funded foundation and startup, we are constantly seeking support so that we can continue our great work. So if you feel called to donate to Life Rocks, please head down to the show notes and find the relevant donation link. We accept regular money as well as cryptocurrencies. We greatly appreciate you, our Life Rocks community. Now, back to the show.
And a lot of the studies done into screen time and technology use and all these sort of things show that if there's mentors around, providing other experiences, providing non-judgmental space, learning with their child, doing things on screens with their child, then that creates a buffer for that child to still remain connected to the world around them and not become lost and use the games as a form of escapism. What are they escaping? They're probably escaping the control of their parents and the judgment of their parents. So if the child constantly has to be fearful around their use of a thing, then you're going to want to do it more ultimately. And I did as a teen and whatever, and I was on video games and just you find a context for it in your life, I think, if you're given the space to.
And I think the thing that parents forget is the hardest time to be a parent is now. And I don't mean like because of the pandemic, in this very moment. So the hardest time is the time that they're having. Whatever you're experiencing in the present is going to be the most difficult, and the teen years will provide a series of hard times for the parent, but it's not forever. And that's really hard to remember when you're in the thick of it. It doesn't last forever. And I can't remember, one time I looked up how many days the adolescent experience is, and I can't remember, but then I looked at my life and how many days I've lived, and I was like, that was such a short period of my entire life. Those days go by very fast, and they might be inconvenient for you, but authoritarian parenting is a response to parents who feel inconvenience in the developmental stage of their child. And that's fucked up. I'm sorry for teen experiences inconveniencing me. Therefore, change your behavior to serve me.
Yeah, that's old school. It's the children are seen and not heard. And so more mentoring and more partnership. And I love that you've expanded that vision of partnership for myself and everyone in the audience, for sure. So in your TEDx talk, you have this moment, and I think it was your son Miro reading it out, but he was talking about you having a moment when you're planning for TEDx. You have this moment of paralysis where you say, what can we possibly say about education in front of a room of educators at a TEDx conference on education? And I had a laugh, because I think anyone who's into unschooling, alternative education, independent learning, sovereignty realizes that we're swimming upstream and we're constantly sort of facing down these institutions and saying, hey guys, there's a better way. And then to get that across that's our journey, right? Isn't it? Yeah. I just wanted to share that was an interesting thing. Congratulations for getting up there and sharing what you do and getting that out into the world, because there is another way, and I don't think institutional learning is the only way, but it's been presented in that way. Our culture really pedestals that way of learning, and we need to bring it off that pedestal. Yeah. Can you talk a bit about how your programs and what you're doing and the experiences, the courses that you create for children is unwinding that?
Sure, happy to. In our own journey, when we decided, we didn't start off as homeschoolers or unschoolers or world schoolers. We started off as a family who decided to travel and empower ourselves. And that was really a result of the economy crashing. So we never set out to do this. We were going to travel for 1 year, and intuitively as a parent, I knew that I'd take my son out for 5th grade. He's going to learn way more traveling for this year than he ever would in elementary school in LA County than he in 5th grade there. This was such a great learning adventure. And I knew that. I had never heard of unschooling. I never considered to homeschool because I, as a single parent running a business, I just didn't have time. But like I probably would have, but I couldn't. Sure. So traveling was great. We both learned together. We looked at it as a learning adventure.
And what business were you running before you got into this?
I owned a branding agency, a boutique branding agency that focused on green eco companies and nonprofits in LA. And I worked for a total of 18 years in advertising and .com and marketing design, those fields. Yeah. The last 8 of those 18 years, I owned my own agency. And when the economy crashed in California, that was the inspiration to do something, to just be a victim of all that. Sure. So we left. My son and I left. We were going to have this adventure. That was in 2008 is when the economy crashed. 2009 is when I closed my business and we left. And we were, like I said, going to travel for a year, 5th grade, nothing on traveling for a year. Thing is, we never went back. So it's 2022 and we still have been back.
I love that.
We just continued things. We just continued to travel and learn and understand that the world was an amazing place to learn. But the big thing that helped us on this journey, which will answer the question about alternative education, was and I talked about this in the TEDx talk, I knew that I wanted my son to be educated. That was really important because, of course, I want him to succeed and I want to give him the world. And
that's a major concern of parents, is that unschooling is not going to create right education.
Right. So we started to look at the definition of education. And then I started to read all about what is the purpose of education. So the definition and the purpose were not congruent, and I was starting to have problems with that. And the definition of education included a lot of scope and sequence, which was created individually where I'm from, the United States, and individually for each state. Yep. Scope and sequence. At this year, you should be doing this. At this year, you should be doing this. And all of that included the sequence, the order in which he needed to learn it. And 5th grade, I was told by his teachers when I took him out, you shouldn't take him out. This is a very important year for children in California because they're learning all about the Spanish missions in California. And I love taking him to Latin America. He's going to learn about this firsthand. That's okay. He can skip not learning California missions. So the scope was determined by the state, what they deemed important for them to learn. And when I started looking at California missions, I'm like, why do they need to learn reading comprehension at this level at this time? Besides the fact that my son is way ahead of it, does that mean he needs to be held back? Why does he need to learn about missions? Why does he have to have this level of that? And each year goes in sequence.
Yeah.
And in order to guarantee the scope and sequence are absorbed, there's evaluation and testing. And I'm like, this is not education that I want. And it certainly is not learning. And then I was like, ding, light bulb moment. Learning. That's what I want. Learning. Okay, let's not do education anymore. Let's do learning. And then the world schooling, the unschooling, the experiential learning, the social learning, all of that was the learning part. And it included more than academics. It included knowing about internal worlds, like we talked about. It included things like what they call the soft skills. So collaboration and cooperation. Resolution was really important. All of this stuff at the base, all the soft skills that people really need to have in life come from self-inquiry. Yeah. And self-inquiry was at the root of whatever we did. And the academics that were important to him, the academics that were revealing itself through our travels, those were the things that we focused on because they were relevant and in context and meaningful. And if he defined and developed a love of learning and the ability to research and to feel empowered, then he's educated. So there you go. That's why.
100%. Yeah, that's really awesome. And so important that people get these definitions down. Yes, modern mainstream schooling is more like an indoctrination of the program based around certain subjects. So have you read John Taylor Gatto at all?
Yeah.
The underground history of American schooling. For anyone out there who's interested in taking a dive into the inception of forced schooling, which is, you know what it is. If you don't come to school, we're going to get cranky at your parents and might send you a bill or child abuse or whatever.
Part of the problem with me first, I never questioned that, but part of the problem once I became educated in that is I'm an anarchist by nature. I was like, what? Why did I never question this before? And there must have been something very close and innate to being a mom that I just wanted what's best for my child and not knowing that there were other options. It was my job to educate myself first. And that was really important. But I didn't have any problems questioning it once I was spun around in a direction that took me down rabbit holes.
Yeah, it's definitely a rabbit hole once you start having a poke around in there, and I'd say simultaneously confronting as an adult to look back and go, wow, we've got it so backwards, which is why I just think the work that you're doing with children and teenagers is so important, so needed. And yeah, I think anyone looking into this movement of world schooling, unschooling, rewilding, and people have been forced into it a little bit, or at least given a good kick in the ass to move towards it more with lockdowns, people working from home. A lot of parents have had to take on the role of teacher and having to face becoming a mentor and probably looking at this problem of partnership or solution of looking to partnership with their children more. So I think for any parents out there who have been put in that situation of having to take charge of their child's learning, to be more active in their child's learning process, Lainie's book is going to be amazing for you, because it's just chock-a-block full of everything. It lays out the science, it lays out the education, the history of this stuff, and it's the last third of it's really just 100% practical tools and questions and exercises that you can go through with your child. And I think people are thinking that teens, typically, I'd say most people are thinking of 13 through to 19, but developmentally it's more like extending up to 25 and even coming a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
10, 11, 12.
Yeah.
Definitely that kind of between phase. And if you've got a younger child right now, they're going to be a teenager soon, so you better read this book before that happens, because it's it's definitely got it all in there. So tell me a little bit about what you're up to now, where people can go to find your work and get involved in what you're doing, and anything else that you'd love to share with our audience.
Sure. So for the book, this is it. It's called Seen, Heard, and Understood: Parenting and Partnering with Teens for Greater Mental Health. Yeah, like you said, the last third is chock full of exercises and tools. And yes, it is practical, but it will hold you as the parent accountable. And if you are interested in developing a stronger and more connected relationship with your teen, and not change their behavior for your convenience, but to understand what part of the connection you are responsible for and what part they're responsible for, and come at it from a partnership perspective, your lives will change. They're going to grow up soon. You're going to be an empty nester at some point, like me, right? My son is 23, and I'm so grateful we have this beautiful connection to stay connected. Our relationship is so solid, and I think that's really great. And that's because we've cultivated this really strong relationship. So you can find my book on Amazon. You can also find me at transformativementoringforteens.com. And we didn't mention this, but my son and I launched a company together in, what year was that? 2012 or something like that. We did 10 years. 10 years of bringing groups of teens around the world to different parts and having these immersive world schooling learning experiences. We've produced month-long retreats in Peru, Mexico, South Africa, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, oh my gosh, Wales, Greece, where else? Ecuador, all over. And we dig into the cultural, I mean, it's all about cultural immersion. But like I've said, travel has given us an amazing opportunity to step outside of our comfort zone and really reflect on the internal worlds and respond to the things that we're seeing in the external worlds. So it's really about mental health worldviews and identity and self, as much as it is about travel. So that's Project World School. And if you're a family and are interested in world schooling, I also have a community on Facebook called We Are World Schoolers. And so just look for us there. And all the conversations are around learning or travel or anywhere in between.
Great. Oh, that's awesome. And what have you got coming up in the short term for you for the rest of this year?
Ooh, I'm in the middle of a couple of courses right now. So I'm working with a group of teens during my 12-week course. which is a mentoring course where I present the tools and challenges and all sorts of wonderful, fun things. And then my son and I co-teach an 8-week course for the tweens, for the younger ones. He loves working with the younger ones.
Yeah.
I work with the older ones myself. And we're in the middle of that. But what I have coming up, it's not published anywhere, and you're the first to hear about it.
Yes.
So I'm taking the work that I've done with Project World School to get hundreds of teens around the world to different places. And I am now developing a mental health. I'm sorry, let me, good old WhatsApp. Sorry about that. I am now developing a mental health week, a 10-day retreat here in Mexico for a group of teens, taking them through a self-inquiry experience based on the hero's journey. And that'll hopefully be either in fall of this year or maybe in the winter. So I'm just working on designing the experience now. So that will be available on my website, Transformative Mentoring for Teens. There's signups for our email list on both Project World School and Transformative Mentoring for Teens. So if you're interested in being the first to know about this hero's journey, self-inquiry, mental health journey for teens here in Mexico, it'll include things like improv and psychodrama and journaling, and we're writing a story. We're doing all sorts of art projects, and just the whole thing put together is going to be this massive discovery adventure into self. And yeah, I'm super, super excited about that. So that's coming up. I don't know when, but I'm working on it soon.
Wow.
I've got vacation, so it's going to be here in Mexico.
That's amazing. I'd love to hear how that goes in the future, and I hope that we get to have more conversations. I didn't get to everything that I wanted to talk to you about today. Some of the other things were just, I noticed you have a great depth of understanding when it comes to the archetypes and the archetypal psychology of the teenage years, and I see this is like a hidden framework that exists that everyone's aware of, but no one really talks about, which I guess is the essence of a myth. It's there, but it's like a force in itself. So I think that'd be really valuable to share with our audience. And
yeah, I'll come back on and talk about that. I like talking about masks first.
Yeah.
Because it's something that we can all identify with. We all wear masks for certain situations, and I like to help people unpack that and recognize the personality that's showing and the personality that's hidden, and that's a really great entrance into archetypes.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Next time.
So I've got one final question for you.
Yeah.
And just from the here and now, what is your wish for the future generations?
Oh, it's huge. My wish for the future generations is that they are all raised by parents that have healed their generational trauma. And that comes to an end. That means authoritarian parenting, punitive parenting where there is more stress on performance behavior than connection. All that's coming to an end. That's what I want. So us as parents, we need to take that. That's what we're responsible for. What I want for teens and the next generations is that they feel empowered to question authority and to recognize that authority comes from within, that they have autonomy over self, body, thoughts, which is huge because a lot of the indoctrination is taking away our sovereignty of thought, and that the internal worlds are a beautiful place to start becoming accountable for and nurturing and really taking care of.
Wow, great. So you're shooting for the sky, and I like to do that as well. And let's get there. Let's definitely get there. That would make the world such a great place. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. It's been a really fun conversation. I'm really grateful.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Until next time, Life Rocks audience, keep it real.
Thank you so much for listening to the Life Rocks podcast. If you enjoyed the show, then leave us a review. We'll be back soon with more inspiring content, and in the meantime, remember, life rocks.